With this fire, our life burned away. The hiss and crackle of the flames sounded like something alive. An animal feeding, snarling, devouring 15 years of history, one glowing ember at a time. The air was thick with the scent of burning perfume and scorched leather, the smoke curling upward like a dark sermon to the night sky. Then came the sound that ended it all, a single metallic ping, sharp and cold, as Jessica's wedding ring hit the pile of designer ash. It echoed in the stillness like the toll of a funeral bell, the death knell of our marriage. 15 years. 15 years of convincing myself that Jessica's coldness was just exhaustion, not indifference. 15 years of smiling through her excuses about late meetings, client dinners, and weekend conferences. 15 years of being the fool who believed in the sanctity of vows while she rehearsed lies in the mirror. And all of it, every illusion, every scrap of faith, collapsed because of one careless text. A message she never meant for me to see. David's in the shower. God, I can't wait to feel a real man inside me again. His pathetic attempts last night made me want to laugh. That was what I read on her phone this morning as I stood in our spotless kitchen, steam rising from my untouched coffee. The message glowed on the screen like a confession carved into glass. It was meant for someone named Mark Newton, her boss at Hartwell Industries. The man she'd praised for months as driven, brilliant, a real leader. Now I knew why her eyes lit up whenever his name came up in conversation. My name is David Grant. I'm 39 years old, a project manager for Morrison Construction here in Pittsburgh. I fix things for a living. Pipes, foundations, structures built by men who thought their work would last forever. I just never realized I was living in a house already collapsing from within. Turns out, I couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. I stood there frozen, coffee mug halfway to my lips, staring at those words until the letters blurred together. Upstairs, Jessica was humming, getting ready for another important client meeting. I could picture it perfectly now. Her polished smile, her perfume, the hotel room, the sound of her pretending with a man who wasn't me. The funny part? I wasn't even surprised. Deep down, I'd felt this coming like a storm you smell before the rain hits. The way she flinched when I brushed her arm, the obsessive new gym routine, the lacy, expensive lingerie I never got to see, and those looks, those fleeting, disgusted glances like I was something she'd stepped in on her way to better things. But knowing and seeing are two different beasts. Proof changes everything. Proof strips away denial until all that's left is rage and clarity. I picked up her phone and scrolled. One message led to another, then another, until hours had vanished. Weeks of conversations. Months, actually. Their affair went back to Christmas. Our Christmas, when I'd been working double shifts, thinking I was building something for us. Turns out she was spending her nights texting him, whispering her contempt into that little glowing screen. David thinks he's so smart with his little construction projects. But Mark, you built an empire. David's hands are always dirty, but yours are clean and strong. I fake it every time with David. With you, I don't have to pretend anything. Mark, when can we stop hiding? I'm so tired of pretending to love him. Each line hit me harder than the last. I could almost hear her voice, that breathy tone she used when she wanted something. I kept reading, not out of curiosity anymore, but out of a strange, compulsive need to catalog every betrayal, every lie. Call it masochism or call it precision. I'm a builder by nature. I need to see the blueprint of my own destruction. It wasn't just the affair that gutted me. It was how they spoke about me. Like I was a punchline. Like I was too small, too naive, too blue-collar for someone as refined as Jessica. They mocked me, dissected my life as if I were a project they'd already condemned. But they forgot one thing about builders like me. We know how to tear things down, too. The past 3 hours have been deliberate, methodical. I didn't scream. I didn't smash. I dismantled. Every designer dress, every polished heel, every necklace her mother gifted her as a symbol of superiority, all of it went into the backyard fire pit. The flames licked at the night, greedy and gold. The neighbors probably thought I was grilling steaks. They had no idea I was cremating 15 years of deception. Every hiss of burning silk sounded like a sigh from the ghosts of the man I used to be. Then, as if fate had a sense of irony, Jessica's car pulled into the driveway. Her headlights swept over the house, illuminating the smoke rising behind it. Perfect timing. Through the kitchen window, I watched her linger in the mirror, fixing her lipstick, adjusting her hair. Lies needed perfect presentation after all. I sat at the kitchen table, her phone in front of me, screen still open to the message that destroyed everything. The front door opened and her heels clicked across the tile like gunshots in the silence. "Hi, honey," she said brightly. "How was your day?" I didn't answer at first. I let her words hang there, sweet, rehearsed, venomous. Then I gestured toward the phone. "Interesting question, Jess. How was yours?" Her eyes dropped to the screen and the blood drained from her face. "David, I can explain. Can you?" I said, voice calm, almost gentle. "Because I've been reading your explanations for the past 3 hours and they're very thorough. Especially the parts about my performance in bed. The parts about how much you hate touching me." She lunged for the phone, but I pulled it back, my hand steady. "Oh no, we're not done yet." I turned the screen toward her. "This one's my favorite, where you and Mark talk about how stupid I am for not figuring it out sooner. You're right about that part, by the way." Something in her broke then. The mask slipped, replaced by raw panic. "You had no right to go through my phone." I laughed. It was sharp, hollow, the sound of something splintering. "No right? Jess, you've been sleeping with your boss for 8 months and telling him everything about our life, and I crossed the line." Tears filled her eyes, manufactured, desperate. "David, please, it's not what you think. Mark and I were just what?" I interrupted. "Just exploring your options. Just testing how much of a fool I could be before you left. Just waiting for the right time to tell me I was a disappointment." I stood up. The chair scraped the tile. She stepped back. Good. Fear looked better on her than arrogance ever did. Where are my clothes?" she stammered suddenly, glancing around, confusion dawning like a delayed sunrise. "Funny you should ask," I said, pointing toward the glass door. "Take a look." She turned. Her scream sliced through the quiet as she saw the fire pit, still smoldering, ashes glowing red beneath the char. "You burned everything." "David, those clothes were worth thousands." "We're being the key word," I said. "Now they're worth about as much as our marriage." I moved toward the door, my keys already in my hand. "By the way, I left something special on top of the pile. You might want to dig around for it." Her voice trembled. "Where are you going?" "Away from you," I said simply. "You'll hear from my lawyer." "David, wait, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can—" I stopped at the threshold and turned just once to look at her. The woman I'd built my world around stood there barefoot, trembling, lit by the orange glow of the fire that devoured her luxury. Her mascara streaked like war paint. "Here's some communication for you," I said quietly. "I know about Mark, the hotel rooms, the lies, every single one." And with that, I opened the door and stepped into the cold night air. The wind carried the smell of smoke and betrayal. Behind me, something cracked. Maybe a sob, maybe a piece of our life collapsing for good. I didn't look back, because some fires are meant to finish what the truth starts. And here's what you can trust. I'm done being your pathetic husband who doesn't know any better. I said it quietly, but the words carried the weight of a verdict. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was louder than any scream could have been. Jessica stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale in the flickering light spilling in from the fire outside. Her lips trembled like she wanted to say something, but the truth had already burned through every excuse she could offer. I turned and walked out, boots echoing against the hardwood like a drumbeat of finality. The night air hit me, cold, clean, merciless. I got into my truck, shut the door, and for a long second just sat there, breathing. My hands rested on the steering wheel, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from release, the kind that only comes after years of holding everything in. As I shifted into reverse, I caught sight of her in the rearview mirror. Jessica was running toward the backyard, her robe flapping in the wind, a silhouette framed by smoke and ruin. Probably thinking she could salvage something, anything from the ashes. But she wouldn't find much. I'd been thorough, surgical, every trace of her vanity reduced to dust. Then my phone buzzed. Her name flashed across the screen. Jessica. David, please come home. We need to talk about this like adults. I stared at the message for a long time, my reflection ghosting across the glass. Talk like adults. That was rich. I typed back slowly, each word deliberate, each keystroke a nail in the coffin. Adults don't cheat on their spouses for 8 months. Adults don't mock their partners to their lovers. Adults don't lie every single day for the better part of a year. But you're right about one thing. We do need to talk. You'll be hearing from me soon. I hit send. Then I threw the phone onto the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove into the night. The road stretched ahead of me, slick with rain, the city lights reflecting like ghosts on the pavement. I ended up at my brother Eddie's apartment across town. Eddie, 2 years younger, louder, sharper, the kind of man who could smell trouble before it spoke. He'd never liked Jessica, called her ice in heels. He tried to warn me years ago. I didn't listen. Love makes you deaf. When he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't need to ask. He just smirked. Well, well. Let me guess. You finally figured out what the rest of us already knew. I exhaled, the corners of my mouth twitching in something that might have been a laugh. Can I crash here for a few days? He stepped aside, waving me in. Of course. But first, tell me you didn't just walk away with your tail between your legs. For the first time all day, I smiled, an exhausted, hollow smile that still managed to feel real. Eddie, you know me better than that. Walking away was just the opening move. Eddie's place was everything Jessica hated. Sports memorabilia on the walls, a cracked leather recliner and the smell of motor oil faintly clinging to everything. It felt like freedom, like home before everything got complicated. He handed me a beer and dropped into his chair. So, he said, cracking the cap off his own bottle, what's the plan? Please tell me it involves making that witch pay for what she's done. Oh, it does, I said, opening my laptop. But first, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. I started typing. Tell me what you know about Mark Newton. Eddie's eyebrows lifted. The guy she's been screwing. He leaned back, smirking. Oh, I know plenty. He's married to some rich doctor. Lives in one of those penthouses downtown. Drives a Mercedes that costs more than we make in 2 years. Anything else? I asked. Word is, he's done this before. Cheats on his wife with employees. Always the same pattern. Keeps it quiet, keeps it clean. Guy's a predator, but he's smart about it. I nodded slowly, the pieces forming a shape in my mind. Predators always think they're untouchable, until someone smarter hunts back. For the next hour, I went digging. LinkedIn gave me the polished version of Mark Newton, the visionary, the executive, the kind of man who uses words like synergy and leadership culture. Facebook painted a different picture, smiling beside his wife, Lydia, in expensive suits and perfect lighting. A life built for display. And with just a little more effort, public records, a few obscure forums, I learned everything else. Mark Newton, age 45. Married for 12 years. No children. Lydia Newton, doctor, cardiologist, successful, dedicated. Their marriage looked like a trophy, not a bond. And from what I could see, Mark treated it that way. I leaned back in my chair. He's got everything, money, power, image. But you know what he doesn't have? Eddie shrugged. A conscience? Exactly, I said. And that's where I come in. Eddie frowned. You're not talking about doing something stupid, are you? I looked him dead in the eye. Not stupid. Careful. The next morning I drove to Hartwell Industries, Jessica's workplace, Mark's kingdom. The glass tower loomed over downtown Pittsburgh like a monument to greed, reflecting a city it didn't care about. I parked across the street, coffee in hand, waiting. At 11:47 a.m., the doors opened and out walked Mark Newton. And there he was, the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. He looked like a movie villain. Tall, sleek, confident in a way that came from never being told no. His tie perfect, his watch gleaming, his smile practiced. The kind of man who treated charm like a weapon and other people's lives like collateral damage. I followed him from a distance as he entered an upscale restaurant nearby. Inside, he greeted two men, both wearing suits as sharp as his. I stayed outside, watching through the glass as they laughed, shook hands, clinked glasses. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I didn't need to. His body language said it all: entitlement, control, arrogance. And every time he glanced at his phone, I knew exactly who he was texting. Jessica. For a moment, my vision blurred. Not with tears, those were long gone, but with something colder. Focus. This was my enemy. The man who stole my wife's loyalty and my peace of mind. But as I studied him, I noticed something. Tiny cracks beneath the polish. The way he checked his reflection too often. The way he leaned back when one of his lunch partners spoke. The small, smug smirk that came from knowing he could get away with anything. That arrogance. That was going to be his downfall. I spent the rest of the week tracking them both, learning their patterns. Jessica was staying at her friend Rena's downtown apartment, crying on shoulders, playing the victim. I could imagine the lies she told. David was controlling. David didn't understand me. Mark, meanwhile, went about his life untouched. Same office hours, same gym, same late-night bar meetings. They thought I'd vanish quietly, licking my wounds. But they underestimated me. Friday evening changed everything. I was sitting in a coffee shop near Hartwell Industries pretending to scroll through emails when the door opened, and there she was. Not Jessica. Her Dr. Lydia Newton, Mark's wife. She was even more beautiful than her photos suggested, but it wasn't a beauty of vanity. It was the kind that carried fatigue and grace in equal measure. Her hair tied back, scrubs under a wool coat, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She ordered coffee, sat alone, and kept glancing at her phone, frustration deepening with every passing minute. I stood up before I could overthink it, walked over. My pulse was steady. This wasn't rage anymore. It was purpose. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Are you Dr. Lydia Newton?" She looked up, startled. "Yes, do I know you?" "Not yet." I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "My name's David Grant." I paused just long enough to meet her eyes. "And I think we have something in common." She frowned, confused. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." I leaned forward, my voice low, deliberate, the way a fuse whispers before it burns. "You will." The evidence was a slow, inevitable truth folding itself into place. Not a single, shocking photograph, but a full pattern. A map of Mark's teeth-bared appetite for conquest and Jessica's willingness to be consumed. I laid it all out like a case on a wooden table. Emails with timestamps, hotel receipts with credit card numbers, grainy lobby photos, message threads threaded through months like a scar. Each piece of proof felt heavier than the last, not because of what it showed, but because of what it meant. That this wasn't a messy mistake. It was a ritual. A ritual of predation that Mark had practiced before and was practicing again. Lydia sat across from me in the coffee shop, palms curled tight around her cup as if the ceramic might crumble. Her hands were hands that had saved people. They weren't the hands of a woman who'd signed up for being a punchline. When I slid the folder across the table, it made a dull sound, almost polite. She opened it like someone reading a patient chart, scanning with clinical detachment and then, slowly, with a dawning, raw comprehension. "What are you going to do with all this?" she asked, voice small but steady. The tiredness around her eyes was a mask she couldn't fully hide. I met her gaze. There was a calm at the center of me now that had nothing to do with forgiveness and everything to do with precision. "I'm going to give them a choice," I said. "They can end it quietly and accept the consequences, legal, professional, personal, or I can make this public, and I will destroy both of their careers." The words were a scalpel. They cut clean. She looked as if I'd offered her a door and a cliff at the same time. "You think they'll choose quietly?" "No." I let a small, almost humorless smile slip in. "They're too arrogant. They'll laugh. They'll call my bluff. And then I'll show them exactly how wrong they are." That night I didn't sleep. Not because of adrenaline, but because of a workman's focus. One I'd used my whole life on blueprints and deadlines. I composed the messages with the same care I'd give a bid proposal. The tone mattered. Framing mattered. If I leaned on malice, I'd be vulnerable. If I leaned on facts, I was untouchable. Anonymity helped, but so did restraint. I attached one photographic proof to each anonymous message. Not pornographic. Not the kind that would scream scandal on its own, but intimate enough to make denial painful. Mark kissing Jessica in a hotel lobby, an image that said everything without shouting. 48 hours. That was the deadline. 48 hours to see whether they would choose shame or arrogance. They chose arrogance. Jessica called within an hour, her voice a mixture of panic and fury. "David, what the hell is this email? Are you threatening me?" She sounded smaller than I expected. Panic has that effect. It makes even the loudest people sound thin. "I'm giving you an opportunity to do the right thing for once," I said. But there was no patience in the line, only the brittle edge of someone cornered. "You can end it and tell the truth, or this goes public." "You can't blackmail me," she hissed. "I'll call the police." Her sentence became a string of legal threats and promises of countersuits. She tried to flip the script, as if my evidence could be made to look like a crime on my part. "Call the police," I invited, because my case was airtight. "Tell them your husband has evidence of your affair. See how that looks in an investigation." Her voice broke then. "David, please. We can work this out. Mark and I. It wasn't serious. It was a mistake." The words sounded thin in the receiver. A mistake that lasted 8 months was, by any reasonable measure, more than a mistake. It was a decision. Tears made her voice tremble. I expected something. Contrition, maybe, or outrage at being exposed. What I felt instead was an emptiness that I couldn't force around with pity. I'd already burnt that bridge. Mark's call came later, cool and dangerous. "Listen, you pathetic little man," he said, as if I'd let his contempt define me. "I don't know what game you're playing, but you're playing with fire. Do you have any idea who I am? What I can do to you? I can destroy your career with a single call." I listened to him spool out threats like a man testing a coat of armor. Then I put the facts across, quietly, without spectacle. "You're about to find out," I said. "Actions have consequences. I want you to remember how this feels when your world is upside down." There was a pause, the kind that happens before a storm reorients its path. Then he promised me ruin in tones colder than the winter rain. 48 hours came and went. Nothing. They had called my bluff and, in their arrogance, assumed my hand was weak. They had no idea the whole thing was a chessboard and not a poker game. So Phase 3 began. The press, the employers, the board. I didn't scream their sins into the void. I presented iron to iron. The first email at 9:1 a.m. on Friday went to everyone at Hartwell Industries, the board, HR, every middle manager who might suddenly remember a strange lunch or an uncomfortable late-night phone call. The subject line read, "Workplace harassment. Evidence attached." I included a precise professional dossier outlining Mark's pattern of predatory relationships, documented emails, hotel receipts, timelines, and Lydia's testimony about his long history of infidelity disguised as discreet relationships. To Jessica's employer, I sent a similar package, one that framed her behavior in violation of professional ethics and client confidentiality standards. Because, in most offices, romantic entanglements that compromise client relationships and break policy aren't just gossip, they're liabilities. Then I sent the package to the local press. Corruption and scandal are oxygen to the media. I wasn't cruel, I was factual, the kind of fact that burns when it lands in inboxes and boardrooms. By noon, the calls started. Jessica's voice was raw, a mix of fear and fury. "You bastard," she screamed into the phone. "They suspended me pending investigation. Do you know what this means for my career?" Her words tumbled, desperate and exposed. "I know exactly what it means," I said. "It means you're finally facing something you forced on others." She threatened me with lawsuits. "I'll sue you for defamation." She spat. I almost laughed. "With what lawyer? On what money?" Her threats were paper boats against the tide of what she'd done. Mark's call was colder, more controlled. "You have no idea what you've started," he said. "I will destroy you." The confidence in his voice barely masked the tiny crack I'd heard earlier, the first sigh of someone who believes he's untouchable and is discovering he might be mortal. That evening, I called Lydia. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Better than I expected," she said. There was a new softness in her voice, one that had nothing to do with weakness. "Mark came home screaming about you, but when I told him I knew everything and that I was filing for divorce, he deflated," she laughed, a small victorious sound. "Any regrets?" "Only that I waited so long. My lawyer said the evidence was more than adequate for divorce, for damages, for what I needed. It wasn't about money, not anymore. It was about ownership." About the ledger balancing. That night, Eddie and I watched the story lead the local news. Channel 7's anchor talked about executives suspended amid harassment allegations, file photos of Mark flashing across the screen like a wanted poster. I sat there with a beer in my hand and watched the face of the man who'd tried to make me small turn into the angry, confused blur of someone losing everything they'd been taught to cherish. "You actually did it," Eddie said, a grin tugging at his lips. "You took down the golden boy." "It's just the first round," I told him. "They still think they can weather this. They still think they're untouchable. Next, I make sure everyone they know understands exactly what kind of people they are." My voice was flat, the word everyone tasting like iron and ash. Over the weekend, I built a website. Precise, factual, surgical. A timeline of evidence laid out like an autopsy report. Dates, receipts, messages, and photos, each item linked to a source. I registered the domain in Mark's name because search engines like to reward specificity. I wanted anyone who Googled either of them to find the truth first. No pornographic content, no slander, only documents. The internet is a merciless court when you present it with unassailable proof. Setting it up felt oddly ceremonial. It was the digital equivalent of nailing a sign to the front lawn. Each upload, each PDF attached, felt like another board driven into a coffin of denial. I watched analytics tick up as people found the site, clicked, and read. The numbers were small at first, a trickle, but momentum has a way of becoming an avalanche. And then, just when I allowed myself a thin smile in victory, the world shifted. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. No country code, no name. I picked it up with that same steady hand I used to lay out plans, but this time the steadiness was layered with a new awareness, that the people I'd set falling might not fall quietly. A text popped up. "Nice work. But you started something you can't control?" I felt the words in my chest like a physical blow. Control is an illusion. I taught myself that long ago in the trenches of construction. But hubris has its predators, and now I was the prey. Another buzz. A second number. A photo attachment. I tapped it open because curiosity is my old, unreliable companion. It was a screenshot. Not of my website, not of Mark's office, but of Eddie's living room couch. A timestamp glowed in the corner. The very hour Eddie had poured me that beer. In the center of the frame, on the coffee table, lay a familiar object. My wedding ring, tarnished and warped, half buried under a newspaper. My breath left me. The ring should have been in the ashes. I had watched it drop. I had watched the metal sing its thin death note into the fire. For a moment I thought my mind had betrayed me, that the smoke had made me hallucinate. But the photo was real. The ring looked real, and attached to it, as if to be savored, was a short message. "You think you burned the past. We just saved a piece of it for later." Outside, a siren wound toward some unseen emergency. Inside my chest, a new, cold drumbeat began. Not of victory now, but of danger. The chessboard had shifted into a new game with players I hadn't fully seen. Whoever had sent that photo wanted me to know two things. They could reach into my life, and they could play with the memory of what I'd lost. I looked at Eddie, whose smile had frozen on his face like a photograph. "Whoever that is," I said, my voice low and steady, "they're playing for keeps." He set his beer down, eyes unreadable. Then we don't play their game. But the truth, the hard, unavoidable truth, is that once you pull a match from the box, you can't decide where the flame will crawl. I had thought I'd burned my past to ash and walked away clean. I had been wrong, and in the glow of my laptop screen, with the news still scrolling and the website humming with visits, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One line, "We're not done. See you soon, David." The screen went black. The house seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the city continued, indifferent, moving on. Inside, I realized I'd traded a life of slow erosion for a war I'd started. I sat down heavier than before and opened a new document. This one not for evidence, but for plans. Because if they wanted a war, they'd have one. If they thought they could terrify me into silence. They were about to discover that a man who builds for a living can also plan destruction with the same steady hands. But even as I began to write, a small, colder part of me whispered, "When you expose people, they often expose you back." The last line I put on the page before Eddie pushed his chair back and picked up the phone was short and to the point. Lock the doors. Hide the laptops. Call your lawyer, and somewhere on the other end of that unknown line, someone was smiling because they knew something I didn't. Revenge doesn't happen all at once. It moves like a tide, quiet, deliberate, inevitable. Once I'd set it in motion, every ripple I touched became a wave. I didn't just want Mark and Jessica to face exposure. I wanted them to feel what I'd felt. That suffocating sense of walls closing in, the air thinning until every breath reminded you of what you'd done. So I went further. I reached out to Jessica's closest friends, Chelsea, Miranda, and Susan, women who had spent years orbiting her perfect little world of curated brunches and social media smiles. I wrote each of them a message that was careful, respectful, and laced with precision. I didn't rant or accuse. I simply told the truth. How Jessica had been lying to everyone about her marriage. How her dream husband was now a ghost in a house she'd burned herself. And how the affair had gone on right under their noses. The reactions were swift. Predictable, even. Chelsea, sharp-tongued and impulsive, exploded publicly. Within hours, a Facebook post appeared. "Some people pretend to be saints while stabbing you in the back. You know who you are, Jessica." The comments poured in. Gasps, curiosity, gossip. Miranda unfriended Jessica across every platform, deleting years of tagged photos, as if she could erase their friendship from the internet entirely. And Susan broke my heart a little. She sent me a private message that began with an apology and ended with shame. "I should have seen it," she wrote. I stood next to her at the altar when she vowed forever. I should have known. By Monday morning, Jessica's entire social circle had collapsed around her like a dying star. The same women who once envied her polished, picture-perfect life were now whispering gleefully about her fall from grace. Coffee shop gossip thick with irony, laughter ringing with a cruelty only betrayed friends can muster. And then, on Tuesday night, she came. Eddie and I were in the living room when the knock came at the door. Hesitant, trembling, but somehow insistent. When I opened it, she was there, standing in the hallway under the flickering bulb like a ghost who'd forgotten how to haunt. Her hair was unwashed, eyes red and swollen. The once impeccable Jessica, who'd worn her confidence like perfume, now looked hollowed out, her voice barely holding itself together. "David, please," she said, stepping into the light. "You have to stop this. I lost my job. My friends hate me. I can't even walk down the street without people staring. I should have felt something. Pity, maybe. But all I felt was a cold, steady calm. Funny how that works," I said softly. "Actions have consequences." She swallowed hard. "I know I hurt you and I'm sorry. I'm truly, deeply sorry. But this has gone too far. You're destroying my life." I stared at her, this woman who'd once been my home. "The way you destroyed ours?" Her voice cracked. "It's not the same. It's exactly the same," I said. "You lied to me every day for 8 months. You mocked me to your lover. You made me feel insane for seeing what was right in front of me. You took every ounce of trust I gave and set it on fire. And now you want me to pity you?" She was crying now. Not the gentle kind, but the shaking, ugly kind that makes words stumble. David, I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I stepped closer. You don't accidentally fall into bed with your boss. You don't mistakenly send him photos of yourself. You don't plan a future with him while kissing me goodnight and pretending nothing's wrong. Those weren't mistakes, Jessica. Those were choices. She stared at me through the tears, desperate. What do you want from me? What will it take for you to stop this? I looked her dead in the eye. I want you to understand what you did to me. I want you to feel what it's like to have your life torn apart by someone you trusted completely. I want you to taste humiliation and betrayal, the exact flavors you fed me for months. Her voice trembled. And then what? After you've destroyed everything I've built, after you've made sure I can never rebuild my life, what then? Will that make you feel better? For a long moment, I said nothing. The silence stretched until it felt like its own kind of violence. I looked at her. The woman I had once loved so deeply that I'd built my entire world around her, and realized I felt nothing but contempt. I don't know, Jessica, I said finally. Why don't we find out? She turned, shoulders trembling, and left without another word. I watched her go, watched her silhouette shrink in the dim hallway light until she vanished around the corner. That was the last time I ever saw her. But Mark Newton. His chapter was far from over. Mark believed in one God only: power. He worshipped it through money, through dominance, through the quiet conviction that no matter what he did, he'd always come out on top. But I had something now that men like Mark feared more than bankruptcy. Proof. The private investigator I'd hired, an older man named Fletcher with a taste for bourbon and precision, handed me the file 2 days later. You'll like this, he'd said, sliding the folder across the table. Inside were receipts, ledgers, and quietly damning reports. Mark had been using company funds to bankroll his affairs. Hotel rooms billed as client meetings. Expensive dinners logged as business entertainment. Jewelry listed as corporate gifts. It wasn't outright embezzlement, but it was enough to violate half the codes of conduct in the corporate world, and enough to send a chill down his board's spine. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Poetic, cold, absolute. I called Mark's office and told him I wanted to meet. Thursday afternoon. He agreed instantly. Men like him always did. Arrogance was their Achilles heel. Hartwell Industries' executive floor was everything you'd expect from a monument to ego. Marble floors that echoed with every step, glass walls that pretended to be transparent but hid secrets in reflections. The air smelled like money and disinfectant. His assistant led me into the corner office where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a conquest. Mark sat behind a desk big enough to stage a war. He didn't bother standing or shaking my hand. Well, well, he said, smirking. The conquering hero. Come to gloat. Actually, I said, sitting opposite him and setting a manila folder on the desk, I came to make you an offer. I'm listening. I opened the folder, the sound sharp as a blade unsheathing. These are copies of your expense reports from the last 2 years, I said evenly, cross-referenced with hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and travel expenses tied to your various affairs. His face stayed perfectly still, but I saw the subtle twitch, the knuckles tightening, the jaw flexing. You've been using company money to fund your personal life, I continued, specifically to pay for hotel rooms where you've been sleeping with your employees and other men's wives. That's a serious accusation, he said, his voice low. It's a documented fact, I replied. I have receipts, credit card statements, even hotel staff who remember you and your companions. I spread the papers across the desk, a slow fan of destruction. The Marriott downtown, March 15th, charged to Hartwell Industries as a client dinner. Only there was no client, was there, Mark? Just you and Jessica in room 1247. He leaned forward, eyes flicking from document to document, his mask slipping for the first time. What do you want? I leaned back, calm as a surgeon. I want you to resign. Immediately. I want you to issue a public apology. Admit to your affairs, apologize to your wife, and to the women you manipulated. and I want you to repay every dollar you stole from this company. And if I refuse? He asked, his voice now carrying a quiet, dangerous tremor. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that means the storm's already begun. Then these documents, I said, tapping the folder, go straight to the district attorney. I'd spent weeks carefully weaving the final threads of my plan, and it was time to pull them tight. I reached out to Jessica's friends, the ones who once formed her protective circle, the ones who had cheered for her so-called perfect life. Chelsea, Miranda, and Susan. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I simply crafted my messages with precision, calm, factual, and devastatingly clear. I told them that Jessica had been living a lie, smiling in their faces while she betrayed her vows behind closed doors. Each message was a match dropped into dry grass. The responses came like fire. Chelsea, ever the dramatic one, didn't hold back. Within hours, she'd posted on Facebook, calling Jessica a selfish witch who deserved everything coming her way. Miranda went silent. No confrontation, no goodbye. She simply erased Jessica from every corner of her digital life. Blocked. Unfriended. Gone. But Susan was the one that hit hardest. She'd been Jessica's maid of honor, the one who'd stood beside her in a white dress believing in the fairy tale. Her message was quiet, almost trembling. "David, I should have seen it. I'm so sorry." By Monday morning, Jessica's entire social world had collapsed like a sandcastle in the tide. The same women who once envied her were now whispering behind screens and over coffee cups, dissecting her downfall with gleeful fascination. Gossip is cruel that way. It doesn't care who you are, only that you've fallen far enough to be interesting. When Jessica showed up at Eddie's apartment Tuesday evening, she looked like a ghost wearing makeup. Her hair was tangled, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights, mascara smudged into faint bruises beneath her eyes. She stood at the threshold like someone begging for air. "David, please," she said, her voice shaking. "You have to stop this. I lost my job. My friends hate me. I can't even walk outside without people staring." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Funny how that works, isn't it? Actions have consequences. Tears welled in her eyes. "I know I hurt you and I'm sorry. I'm truly, deeply sorry. But this has gone too far. You're destroying my entire life." I tilted my head. "The way you destroyed ours? Tell me, Jessica, how is it different?" She swallowed, trembling. "It's not the same thing." "Oh, it's exactly the same," I said, my voice low, steady, deadly calm. "You lied to me every day for 8 months. You mocked me to your lover. You made me doubt my sanity while you smiled in my face. You didn't just cheat. You dismantled everything I believed about love. And now you want mercy?" Her voice cracked. "I made mistakes, David." "Mistakes?" I stepped closer. "You didn't accidentally fall into bed with your boss. You didn't mistakenly send him pictures. You didn't accidentally plan a new life with him while pretending to still love me. Those weren't mistakes, Jessica. Those were choices." She covered her face, crying harder now. "What do you want from me? What will it take for you to stop?" I paused, staring at the woman I once thought I'd grow old with. "I want you to understand what you did to me. To know what it feels like to have everything you've built torn apart by the person you trusted most. I want you to feel that humiliation, that helplessness. Then maybe you'll understand." Her hands dropped to her sides, defeated. "And then what, David? After you've destroyed me? After I have nothing left? Will that make you feel better?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing, no love, no pity. Just the cold satisfaction of someone who's finally balanced the scales. "I don't know," I said quietly. "Why don't we find out?" She turned away, her sobs echoing down the hall as she left. I never saw her again. But my work wasn't finished, because there was still one man who thought he'd gotten away clean. Mark Newton. Mark had always believed his wealth could shield him, that his influence made him untouchable. But money can't protect you from the truth. My private investigator, worth every cent, uncovered everything I needed. Company funds used for his affairs, hotels billed as client dinners, gifts categorized as business expenses. It wasn't embezzlement, not technically, but it was enough to destroy his career, enough to ruin his name. I set the meeting myself, Thursday afternoon. His office. Hartwell Industries' executive floor reeked of arrogance. Marble floors, gold-plated nameplates, the quiet hum of power. Mark's corner office stretched out over the skyline, all glass and ego. He sat behind his desk when I entered, not bothering to stand. "Well, well," he said with a smirk. "The conquering hero comes to gloat." "Actually," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him, "I came to make you an offer." "I'm listening." I placed the manila folder on his desk. "These," I said, "are copies of your expense reports for the past 2 years. Cross-referenced with hotel receipts, restaurant bills, credit card statements. Care to guess what they show?" His smirk faltered. His hand twitched slightly on the polished wood. "You've been using company money to fund your little extracurricular activities. Hotel rooms, dinners, gifts for women who aren't your wife. Including my wife." He leaned back. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation," I said, spreading the papers out between us. "It's a fact." I tapped a receipt with my finger. "The Marriott. March 15th. Billed to Hartwell Industries as a client dinner. No client, just you and Jessica in room 1247. Silence. Finally, he asked, "What do you want?" I met his eyes. "I want you to resign, immediately. I want you to admit your affairs publicly, apologize to your wife, and pay back every dollar you stole. Every single one. And if I don't, then these documents go to the district attorney, the IRS, and every news outlet in the city. You'll be lucky if you're left with the clothes on your back." Mark stood, walking to the window, staring out over the glittering city. "You know what the funny thing is?" he said. "Jessica wasn't even that good in bed. Enthusiastic, sure, but nothing special." I didn't move. He turned, smiling cruelly. "You want to know why I did it? Because I could. Because she was married to a nobody like you. Because it amused me to take something that belonged to someone else." He stepped closer. "You want to know what she really thought of you? She laughed at you, David. Said being married to you was like being trapped with a loyal dog. Always begging for affection. Too stupid to realize you'd already been replaced." The words hit like knives, but I didn't flinch. "Is that supposed to hurt me?" I said softly. "All it does is confirm you're both exactly what I thought." "Pathetic," he sneered. "We deserve each other. That's why this isn't over. She chose me, David. You can't change that," I smiled. "Actually, Mark, I already did." He frowned. "Jessica called me 3 days ago," I said, walking toward him, begging me to stop. "She said she'd do anything. She also told me some interesting things. About you. About how you promised her the world, but kept your wife, your money, and your lies. How you told her she was special, but she found out about the others. About how she finally realized what you are." Mark's confidence cracked. "You're lying. Am I? When's the last time she returned your calls? When's the last time she reached out first?" He hesitated, pale now. "She's not scared of me, Mark," I said. "She's scared because she finally sees you for what you are, a predator who's run out of prey." I placed a card on his desk. "You've got 48 hours. Resign quietly or go down publicly. Either way, your career ends here." As I turned to leave, I paused at the door. "Oh, and Jessica wanted me to tell you something. She said she's done playing games with boys, and ready to work things out with a real man." It was a lie, but the way his face twisted made it worth every word. 2 days later, the news broke. Hartwell Industries executive resigns amid policy violation investigation. Mark Newton, the untouchable man, was gone. His wife divorced him. Jessica fled to Cleveland trying to outrun the whispers. They tried to keep their affair alive, but without his title, his penthouse, his power, she saw him for what he was. Nothing. And me? I moved on, bought a small house, got promoted, started breathing again. People say revenge doesn't fix anything. They're wrong. Sometimes it doesn't just fix you, it frees you. Because the truth is, there's no peace quite like watching those who broke you crumble beneath the weight of their own sins. And that peace felt incredible